Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Working Conversations podcast, where we talk all things leadership, business communication, and the future of work. I'm your host, Dr. Janel Anderson. Today, I am beyond thrilled to welcome a truly remarkable guest to the podcast, a woman whose career, creativity, and charisma have inspired countless people, including myself. Carolyn Strauss is someone who has worn more hats than a department store on clearance day, and she wears them all with style and substance. And Carolyn's journey is nothing short of extraordinary. From gracing runways and magazine covers as a top model with the Ford Modeling Agency earlier in her career, to launching and growing the Carolyn Strauss collection on the Home Shopping Network with over $160 million in sales, she is a powerhouse of entrepreneurial success. In addition to her career in fashion, Carolyn is a certified working genius facilitator, a certified reinvention practitioner, and a certified exactly what to say guide. Credentials that reflect her dedication in helping others thrive in their work and in their whole life. She is a sought-after keynote speaker with appearances around the U.S. and across the world, recently as far away as Johannesburg, South Africa. She's also a top-rated Vistage speaker, the author of 5 books, and the host of the People's Choice nominated podcast, Another Day Above Ground. I am so excited to dive into today's conversation about workplace friendship and to share with you how Carolyn and I became work friends and real friends. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, my friend, Carolyn Strauss.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson. It is an honor to be with you, ma'am.
Let's drop the formalities. Now, Carolyn, I want to share with our listeners kind of how you and I became friends. And I just want to note that our friendship is a fairly recent friendship.
Well, I think the level of our friendship is fairly recent, right? So I think we talk about levels of friendship. So this deep level, enough that you actually are having me on your podcast, which you never do. Because I listen to all your podcasts and you are like so brilliant all by yourself. Clearly, you don't need me. And it's just so much fun. It's just so much fun. When you said, let's go play, I'm like, yes. Right? Okay, well, so go ahead.
And our field is non-traditional compared to many of my listeners who work for corporations or government agencies and that sort of thing. But I think there are some things about the way our friendship that has formed that very much parallel with how a friendship might form in a more traditional organization. And I would slightly disagree with what you just said. I think we have more recently gone from acquaintances to friends.
Yes.
And I would say, like, strong acquaintances, but there's still so much to explore in terms of developing our friendship. So I'm very, very excited about that.
I'm excited about it too. And I love that you remember how we met, because my brain is weird. Like, I don't remember how I met people. Like, people say, oh, how did you meet? I'm like, I have no idea. People are either in my ecology, in my orbit, or they're not. And that's okay. So I want to hear.
So you don't, and I don't even think we met at the particular juncture that I'm thinking of. But when you first came onto my field of awareness, it was 10 years ago. It was in 2014 in San Diego at the National Speakers Association Summer Conference. Now, for our listeners who don't know this conference, and especially even at that time, probably had more attendees than it does now post-pandemic. But we had probably, I don't know, 15,000 professional speakers at this conference. And my interaction with you, Carolyn, was me as an audience member and you on stage. So at that time, and I know our association doesn't always do this anymore, but at that time, there was a lounge area where if it was between sessions or you didn't like any of the sessions, if they just didn't match up with what you needed educationally, you could go hang out in the lounge. And the lounge is where all the vendors were set up. So, they were encouraging people to stop by the vendor booths and all of that sort of thing. But in addition to the vendors, there were speakers in that lounge area, and you were one of those speakers. And I just remember sitting there being like mesmerized. You were talking a little bit about your home shopping network journey and just your role as a sales trainer and just what you bring to the sales field. And as somebody who was relatively new, I mean, I had only been part of the association for a few years at that point. So I was still learning sales myself in terms of how to sell speaking. And I just remember like sitting there and just like gobbling up every little last word that you said.
Wow. Thank you. I actually remember doing that. So I remember being in the lounge area, and and one of the things I remember about that most is they actually were smart enough, and I have to find this somewhere, to have one of those cartoon drawing people who can actually draw your content. Do you remember
Oh, I
that?
remember
And
that.
they
Yeah.
actually drew my content. I wish I could find that cartoon drawing because I could probably use that in a program now because sales is sales and stuff.
Yeah.
But I love that you saw me first. I actually first heard about you through mutual friends. You and I swim in concentric, interconnected circles. So I would talk to somebody and they would say, "Yeah, I'm hanging out with my friend Janelle." I'm like, I know her, but I don't know her. And then somebody else, literally within a month, would say, "Oh, I'm seeing Janelle," or "I'm working with Janelle," or "I saw Janelle present." And I'm thinking, I really need to get to know this woman. So now at the CSP conference, I believe, is
Yeah.
where you and I really, really connected as friends,
Exactly.
or as
Exactly.
deep acquaintances first.
Right. Well, and so Carolyn and I are both, and just as also for our listening audience, Carolyn and I are both certified speaking professionals, which the shorthand way of describing that is basically the good housekeeping seal of approval for speakers. And it just means that we have put ourselves through the paces, not only of having lots of clients over many, many years, but also doing all the paperwork and getting recommendations from those clients to say we've got the chops to do this industry. And we get to go to a special conference that is only for us, that's limited to just a little over 100 people. And that's where I think we were really playing in the same sandbox more and more over the last, say, 5 or 6 years. And again, our orbits were just like, I think, getting closer and closer and closer to one another, such that I think we have this certain familiarity as if we were friends that we had already like gone out to dinner or, hung out for a weekend or something, even though we hadn't. I think, yes, it's probably through our mutual acquaintances that we almost felt like we had.
So I think that's interesting because if we're talking about making friends as grown-ups, I mean that's where you and I started with you inviting me on your show because we were talking about how a lot of people find it very challenging to make friends as grown-ups. And if we have friends from long, long, long time, which both of us do, um, those lives no longer intersect, it seems somehow. So if it's a friend from when you grew up or where you grew up, then it's hard to actually connect unless you get on a plane for some of us and go there. So I think it's crucial for adults to make friends. So one of the things I would suggest, so let's do, tips. You're the doctor, but I've played one on TV. So I am an actor. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a PhD, but I've played one on TV. And I think that looking at your circles and then who's in their circles that you keep energetically or through word of mouth bumping into.
Yeah.
And so if you work in an office with a bunch of people, like in your episode that I listened to, your podcast number
It was number
170.
172, How to Make Friends at Work. And in fact,
Fantastic.
this episode is really like the follow up to that to say how we did this.
Yeah. So I think it's so important to look around and go, you know what? I love what she says, or I like how he responds to things, or this is somebody that seems interesting to me because as you know it's more important to be interested than interesting. So if you're interested in someone, then they'll probably really be open to having a conversation that might deepen the friendship. But that's sort of what happened with us, right? We were in these concentric circles,
Yeah.
and then we finally said, wait a minute, let me have an actual conversation with this actual person
Well,
to
and
see if I like her as much.
yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things that happened in our journey is that as a follow-up to the CSP conference that we were mentioning, is there were these additional follow-up sessions where we could hold ourselves accountable to doing what we said we were going to do. And Carolyn and I were both at them. They were completely optional and they were held on Zoom. And twice in a row, we ended up just randomly being put in the same small group to talk about accountability and what we said we were going to do at that thing, and did we do it. And as we were in those conversations, I was like, dang, I want to know this woman more. And like, we have there's a lot more like connection here, and mutual interest and mutual commonalities and everything than I had first imagined.
There's also a mutual awe, I think. I mean, because you said you first saw me and thought, "Yay, me on the platform." So, yay, thank
Yeah.
you. But for you, I mean, come on, you're a PhD. I can't spell PhD. So, I mean, I look at that and I go, "Wow, that's incredible! The amount of work that you put in to actually learn what you do and what you teach on stage." So, I love that. The other thing that I love is I love your level of integrity on how you value your work, how you value your clients, and how you value your family and your family time. So, looking at that, I think it's so important to surround yourself with people who remind you of the best parts of yourself. And that's what you do for me.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
It's
Yeah.
true. Can I tell you my other core value? I have a core value around friendships. In fact, one of my relationships in 2000, I was dating somebody who I really loved. We had the same birthday. I loved his family. Anyway, we were together for about a year. And when we broke up, what he said to me was, "You have more friends and are busier than anybody I've ever met." And I really thought about that. And first of all, I can't be with a man who denies me my time with my friends. So that was a, deal breaker. So that didn't, it's a good thing that that didn't last. Great guy, still friends. And by the way, I'm still friends. I'm still friends with all of my exes. And that's something that we can actually look at because maybe that's where friendships can also come. But one of the things where I live from is a value that I call vicarious happiness.
Oh.
I live from vicarious happiness, which means that I am happy for the happiness and joy of my friends, whether or not it has anything to do with me.
Oh, I love that. And it's very much in alignment with like the meditation about, just which, if you're familiar with that, it's just about like wishing
Not.
others well, wishing
Oh,
others to be free of suffering, and for the others to find happiness. And when you imagine somebody else, somebody that you know, being happy and being free from suffering and being, just like living their best life, it just makes you happy. Thinking that thought makes you happy.
when I hear about my friends getting an incredible keynote or an incredible consulting contract or take a vacation that's just ridiculously phenomenal, there is not one molecule in my body that resents it.
Yeah.
There can be a little bit of envy, like, wow, maybe someday I want to do that or try that or get
Mm-hmm.
that. But there's no resentment that they got to do that and I didn't. So I literally live from I am so happy for you if it's what you want for you.
Oh, yeah. And I think you just like think that thought, and you just feel happy for others, and then like transitive property, you feel happy yourself.
Yeah. So I think one of the keys for women friendships, look, it is, and you're the doctor here, but I think it is biological that we occasionally have upset or resentment that another woman got something that we didn't because there's not enough. it's like that lack of abundance mentality. And I do think that there's something, I studied the whole differences between men and women for many, many, many years with a woman named Allison Armstrong. She was my mentor. So you can look her up if you guys want. And one of the things she talks about is this thing that women have this voice in our heads that say I should be as good as Janel at doing a podcast. I should be as good as Janel on a stage. I should be as good with family as Janel is. And you know what? First of all, we got to stop shitting all over ourselves, but it is biological that happens. So I think to override it with vicarious happiness is really healthy and will attract more fabulous friends into your world.
Yeah. And I get that sense of, I call it Janelacy. I get that sense of Janelacy when I go into somebody's house that is like spotless and beautifully decorated. And I mean, I live in a state of chaos with like two teenagers still living at home and a dog, and there's dog hair everywhere. And like, we can just never kind of keep on top of everything. And housekeeping is not my foray. It's not my forte, I should say. I'm not, and I don't put a lot of time and effort into it. Anybody who's been at my house recently knows I don't put a lot of time and effort into it. But I go into somebody else's house and I just have this immediate like, oh, my house should be this nice. My house should be this nice. And I have to remind myself, no, I'm up to other things. I'm raising teenagers. I've got a dog. I've got like I'm running a business. I like, maybe someday when I'm retired, I'll have a nice house or, a neat, tidy house. And until
you're
then,
retired, you'll pay someone to come in every other day, which is why I love staying at hotels, because somebody comes and makes my bed every day. Yes, please, because I'm not going to do it. I'm the same as you.
Well, and it's not
my house.
Right. And it's not even about making the bed or the vacuuming. It's just about like, there's just stuff everywhere and has a mind of its own. And I just have to remind myself, oh yeah, that's their choice to have their stuff that way. My choices are being made in other places, and my effort isn't necessarily always going after my stuff. It's going to like get people to cheer practice or whatever I need to do.
Exactly. Although if I had teenagers, I might pay them to do it. So I'm thinking maybe there's a business opportunity for your kids, Janel.
Definitely. Or even just put their own stuff away. I'd be happy with that.
Okay, so I was actually talking to my partners on my podcast, Another Day Above Ground, which is the podcast for, by, and about baby boomers. It's a podcast for people who can't download a podcast, which is the flaw in the plan. But anyway, so we have this fun podcast. We've got over 250 episodes. I'm with two older gentlemen because I won't admit that I'm a baby boomer, but they are my partners in it, and we were just talking, and I asked them about their male friendships. And both of them said they hadn't made a new close male friend in over a decade. And we're women, and we are, at least 45 years old. And we have now made this really close friendship. And, we have several of them. We've talked about that. We both have several newer, deep friendships. So I find that interesting. What's your advice for men, Janel? Because I think the men who are listening actually need our help. And maybe the partners of the women who are listening to you could learn something here.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm just going to go back to some of the advice I gave on episode 172. And I think, because I'm also trying to compare that to what's going on with us. But one of them is just like initiate small talk and be curious about other people. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, but you hop on that Zoom call or that Teams call and you're a few minutes early. And as other people get there and before the meeting starts, just be like, so what everybody do this weekend? Or did you catch that? I mean, here in Minnesota, we thought this last weekend, we thought the Vikings had it in the bag over Detroit. And then like in the last 11 seconds, they tied the game in. It went into overtime. And, you don't even have to be a sports fan to be able to talk about that. You could have just heard that headline on the radio, and you could, dive in with something like that, or the weather, or, what people are up to as the seasons change. There are so many ways to just get curious about other people. And I think sometimes in our current work culture, we are so like back to back scheduled in our meetings that we just forget to do that. And so I think just pausing and taking a breath and just getting curious about other people is a great place to start. And I know just my own friendship journey took a weird trajectory because we moved during the pandemic. And so we moved at a time when like everybody was afraid to talk to their neighbors, first of all. And we moved away from the neighborhood where our children had gone to elementary school. And,
Right.
when kids make friends, then if the kids' parents are fun to be around, then the families spend time together and you become friends with with your kids' friends' parents. And we moved away from all that. And so it was like kind of like starting over. And so I looked not only to my professional network, who do I want to be more close friends with, but also in my own business community. So I recently joined the Chamber of Commerce in my
Brilliant.
community to make business friends, and not necessarily to get business. I just want to make friends with other people who are small business owners because they get me and I get them.
I recommend that all the time. It's the
Yeah.
Chamber of Commerce. It's the Rotary
Mm-hmm.
International Clubs. You can join your local Rotary Club. You can volunteer at at your church or at your synagogue or whatever your flavor of religion happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can go volunteer there or take a class. I meet people when I take classes all the time.
Yeah.
I take classes all the time. Like if there's when I lived in New York City, there was the Learning Annex. And so you could go to the Learning Annex and take a class, and there would always be somebody interesting there. And then you go for coffee, and sometimes they turn into friends. One of my longest friends in New York City, I met at jury duty. I swear, she and I were friends for a lot of years, and then she moved away. And then again, friends, they say that friends are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when people move away, the friendship no longer lands
Yeah.
anymore,
Yeah.
or there's no longer a need for it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But I think it's important to put ourselves, look, part of if it, and you talk about this, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one
Mm-hmm.
of the needs, serious needs, and especially if you're an extrovert like me, one of the serious needs is social connection.
Yeah.
COVID almost did me in. it
Yeah.
it kicked my butt as an extrovert. I was like, every day it's going to end, every day it's going to end. A year later it was finally starting to wane. But I think that finding your tribe, I think, is more important now than ever. And I think at work, it would seem to me that it would be easier because there is that common baseline of something, and then take it one level up and find that thing about them that's fascinating to you.
Well, or yeah, or that you have in common that maybe you didn't know you have in common. Like maybe you both have a rescue dog and you didn't know that because you never brought it up. And one of the things I learned about you that we have in common when I was doing my research on you for introducing you for this podcast is that we both have degrees from Emerson College.
Did not go to Emerson.
I,
Okay, okay,
I did my
okay.
master's degree at Emerson. So I would
Oh,
have been there. So, and for the listening audience, Carolyn has a bachelor's in fine arts from Emerson, which prepared her to be on stage and be an actor and so forth. And I did my master's degree at Emerson College uh, after deciding I wanted to continue my education. And I was living in Boston. And so, yeah. See?
where did you live? Where did you live, Janelle? In Boston?
Well, I went to Boston University as an undergrad.
Okay.
And so we probably hung out. I mean, we probably have a lot of like bars and restaurants and places that we used to both haunt. I waited tables at Pizzeria Uno at Kenmore Square.
Okay, I rated tables at the Ground Round at the Prue.
Oh yeah.
My God, I went to Pizzeria Uno in Kenmore Square all the time. My sister lived in Kenmore Square because she went to BU, and I lived at the corner of Dartmouth and Newbury,
Oh, I think I got my
right
hair
in
cut
Back
right
Bay.
down there somewhere on Newbury, probably
Right,
not too far from
right.
Dartmouth. See, so we are actively demonstrating for the listening audience how you find common interests.
And now we have another layer of stuff to talk about. My gosh, like the professors that you had and what you studied, and the people that you knew, and the people that I know, and the people in the alumni now. Think about
Yeah.
your circle of alumni and my circle of friends who are alumni. And now we get to like put them together in some kind of a cohort. This is
I
ridiculously
told you there was going
cool.
to be a surprise coming up. I knew you didn't. I figured
I
you
had
didn't
no
know that we
I
had
had
that in
no idea
common.
because I didn't do my research because I'm not a PhD. We talked about that.
Research is an occupational hazard for me. My audience knows that.
Yeah, this is
Well,
this is why our friendship is so great because you can do the research and I can riff on it. It'll be great.
One of the other things that I recommended in episode 172, which we have definitely done, is to offer help and support to other people. And it is so hard to ask for help. I mean, most people don't like to ask for help, but when it gets offered, we definitely will, sometimes in Minnesota, we have to offer help 3 times before somebody will take us up on it because we're so darn, independent and and don't want to accept help. But one of our first conversations that you and I had kind of outside of the regular National Speakers Association events and stuff that we went to, we hopped on a Zoom call and we were just learning more about each other and each other's businesses. And we asked for each other for help on proposals because we were both putting proposals together. And it turns out the projects were a little somewhat similar in scope. And then we shared our screens and we're like, oh my gosh, our proposals look really similar to one another. And then you asked me to look at an early draft of your demo reel, which, again, for our listening audience, that is a very vulnerable space to be, to say, hey, look at my video and give me some feedback on it. And so I think just that also takes it to a new level of vulnerability.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate your listeners, right? You guys, thank you for sticking with us for this episode where it's not just the brilliance of Janel, but you get to hang with me for a minute. But I do think it's super important to put a little bit of time and attention into creating a circle of people. One of my affirmations goes, I am only surrounded by people who want what's best for me and I for them.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to be in a circle of people who want what's best for me. And I know you want what's best for me in speaking, in life, in the rescue dog thing. So we both have rescue dogs, right? There's all of that. And in business. And I only want that for you. I only want what's best for you and not what I think is best for you, but what you think is best for you.
Yeah, and that gets into some tricky spaces sometimes in friendships. In fact, I am navigating a thing in one of my friendships right now where somebody has some very, very different ideas. And I don't think and like I'm having to take a step back and say, like, this is her life. She's driving the bus in her life. And I can offer my perspective, but then I just have to step back and fully support her in the choices that she's making and the things that she's doing. And sometimes that can be a challenge for you to in like it really causes you to think about really what you were just saying in terms of that affirmation, but like, how do I take a stand for my friend even if they're not making the same choices I would have made?
And you can then decide how much time you want to spend with that person and how much time they want to spend with you. And I think it really is important to protect ourselves and our energy and our well being. So if someone was a close friend and they're not anymore, one of my favorite lines goes, you know what? Things have shifted in the world. Things have shifted for us. I can feel it. I know you can feel it. This used to work for me. It doesn't work for me anymore. What would work is X.
Yeah.
And then give them the option to vote themselves off the island. Don't just kick somebody off the island without telling them why or that it's not working. But when something's not working, both parties know, both friends know. But I think calling it out is really healthy where you can say, you know what, I love you, but this just isn't working. But what would work is, and maybe you're having a dinner party for a bunch of people and he or she gets to come with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I think so many of our relationships hit an inflection point where they do need to be renegotiated. And sometimes they need to be renegotiated, like, let's spend more time together. And sometimes they need to be renegotiated to say, yeah, like you said, this isn't working in the same way that it used to work. So what would work for us going forward? And
Very
and I think
excited
that's
that we're in
such a
the
grown-up thing to do. I mean,
it
it just seems like it would be easier to ghost the other person, but we're gonna like put on our big girl pants here and take it head on.
That's
Absolutely.
right. I'm just excited that you and I are at the inflection point of spending more time together. There's nobody I would rather hang out with than you.
Me too. And I'm so excited we get to see each other in person next month at our CSP conference that we were just mentioning before. So listeners, thank you for being along on this very unscripted journey that Carolyn and I are taking you on this afternoon or this morning or this evening or whatever time you're listening, and hearing and like witnessing firsthand our friendship grow and hearing a bit about our friendship journey. And, I think there is a certain element of risk and vulnerability when you go from that place of being just sort of like people who show up at the same meetings at work to, hey, let's have, and I think it can be as simple as let's have a 15-minute coffee because I'd love to hear more about your work or more about, what you do outside of work. And I think that's a safe space for people to put themselves in at work because most people will say yes to a 15-minute coffee. It's not a
Absolutely.
huge investment of their life. And as I said in episode 172, you may have to kiss a lot of frogs. Like you might not develop like instant friendship with the first person you ask to coffee. So don't put too much weight on that initial meeting. And even if it doesn't, even if like friendship sparks aren't flying, maybe there was enough there to have a second coffee a month later.
And
So
one of my favorite questions is, so who do you know that? So let's say that you're a tennis player and you go and you have coffee with somebody and they're not a tennis player. Say, hey, who in your world, who do you know that is a tennis player? Do you know where they play and would they be open to a match? And you know what I mean? And that way they're helping you, they're supporting you and getting what you need. You're valuing their relationship and the people in their worlds. Again, it's all about feeling valued and loved. The
yeah,
more you can let people around you feel valued and loved, the better off you are.
absolutely. Oh, and the better off I am because I have you in my world as one of my friends.
Right back at you, babe.
All right. Well, Carolyn, let's wrap this up. If listeners want to know more about you and your work and the work that you do, where should they go to learn more about you, follow you on
They
social
should
media and
call
all that?
you. They should call Dr. Janel Anderson. And no, I'm kidding.
Call me and I will give you a personal introduction to Carolyn.
Stop. No, you can go to carolynstrauss.com and it's spelled CarolynStrauss.com. That's my website. There's a lot about me there. I am very active on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. If you can't find me, have one of your kids look me up because they can find me. Sorry, I'm used to dealing with baby boomers, right?
Well, we will link all that up in the show notes. And this is episode 192. So you will find that those show notes at janelanderson.com/192. All right, my friends, Carolyn included. Remember that the future of work is not only about technology, it's about the values we hold, like the value of friendship, the communities that we build, and the sustainable growth that we're all striving for. We need to keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep envisioning the remarkable possibilities that lie ahead. So if you learned something on this podcast, or if you enjoyed the conversation I had with Carolyn, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast on your podcast player of choice, follow me on social media, all the things. They're all excellent, no-cost ways to support me and my work. And wherever you're listening or watching, please do leave a review. It helps other listeners find me, and it lets me know that you are along for the ride. So until next time, my friends, stay curious, and I will catch you on the next episode. Thank you again so much, Carolyn, for being with us today.
Pleasure.